Rural peasantry are underrepresented by communists is what I've learned. Yeah, and that's for good reason.
The grab attempts were telegraphed, and by the
What
end
is this?
started hiding them quite a bit more.
Oh my god, a casino ad. I fucking hate.
Was really not expecting it.
Totally.
Fucking hate this system.
I mean, the first two
Like,
Remember what anybody else in chat, remember what I said about Twitch ads being atrocious. For a second, I thought that, like, that ad was supposed to be a PSA about gambling. It was like, oh yeah, call this number. You know, many people experience problems with gambling addiction, whatever. But no, it ended up being an ad for gambling, for a gambling app, like a casino app. And they just put that number there basically to legally cover their ass. Like, we, the fucking gambling company, don't morally condone gambling as we advertise our gambling app to you so you spend money on gambling. You know? It's the most, it's indicative because it's like the most naked and direct form of economic exploitation. It's purely extractive. It adds nothing of value. It's like you spend your money under the delusion that you will obtain more money, but because it's a gamble, you don't actually know what you're going to get. The house always wins, essentially. That's now like what the entire economy looks like, which is why ads for casinos and stuff are becoming so much more prevalent. Is because the incentives are kind of centralizing. They're kind of distilling. You're a Bolshevik? I don't know what Bolshevik means. The Bolsheviks were a left-wing movement in Russia. If you know about the Russian Revolution that overthrew the Tsar, the Bolsheviks were the communists who were part of that very broad-based movement, ended up taking power, and eventually became the All-Union Communist Party, did extremely questionable things, but generally a lot of their goals are things that I agree with. It originated as like a haha edgy meme in high school, but then I read more, started reading some both theory and studies on like the fundamental flaws in modern economics and how a lot of it, like, ultimately the Bolsheviks were right. I am anarchy. Good. I mean, I also consider myself an anarchist. Certainly the Bolsheviks would not have considered themselves anarchists. They shot the anarchists, one of the many things they did that I dislike. I do not like the state, particularly because of the overlap between the state and capital.
Yeah, it'll be Lantern on Cheek, Galen on Fox, and we're going to Dreamland. Pretty typical band.
You know.
You see the Battlefield band from the Spacey a lot of the time here.
You said Galen is NorCal?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we know what region?
Remember they shot the anarchists? Yes. Okay. They disbanded the workers' councils and had the anarchists shot in a sort of power centralization bid. Some, like, as weird as it sounds, some of that I actually don't find as questionable. Like, obviously shooting the anarchists was the worst, one of the worst things. But like, sometimes I can see the argument for disbanding the workers' councils because some of the workers' councils were grounded in the rural peasantry rather than urban proletariat. And the rural peasantry are almost uniformly lumpen proletariat. Wow, Lantern looking good. Didn't quite see what happened there. Sheik just kind of fell.
In the big 2-6, you gotta be, right? Like,
Galen's moving like dark in 2026.
Enrique Nubs. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think it's Dubes, right?
Yeah.
Oh, he went for the juiciest read. Rural peasantry are underrepresented by communists is what I've learned. Yeah, and that's for good reason. You know, broke is fuck the peasantry. Woke is, oh, the communists should represent the rural peasantry. Bespoke is fuck the rural peasantry. Their interests are, they have no fucking clue what their material interests are, and they're counter-revolutionary dogs. The rural peasantry and small landowning classes have been the vanguard of reactionism and fascism for as long as those ideologies have been relevant in the days of the nation state. That's where the Nazis got a lot of their base of support. Rural small farmers and petit bourgeois that lived outside the cities. and some petit bourgeois and proletariat that lived in the cities because of their political tactics of sort of aura farming off of the duplicity of the social democrats and such.
Pretty unfortunate exchange for Orlando.
But yeah, if you look at the political demographics of like modern countries, most far right parties enjoy the support of rural, uneducated peasantry, or what would be the modern economic equivalent of that sort of class. Meanwhile, the urban proletariat, the working class of the cities, is better educated and is thus more left leaning. So the communists and socialists tend to represent as a demographic, the urban proletariat, though obviously they represent the interests of both the rural peasantry and the urban proletariat.
That could just like page seal it.
It's just that the rural peasantry are lumpenprole. They are taken in by emotional narratives that directly run contrary to their own interests, like material interests, because they're mad that their like kids won't call them anymore.
Ultimate player who is like playing Melee for the first time.
I think so,
and,
yeah.
Like, just got
Oh,
to
like
gold.
posting the clips?
Yeah, they play Marth. Here's a content idea for you, Isahel. If you're watching, you should do a watch party of historic Melee combat videos.
It's the culture, man. It
Ooh,
actually is
that was a
something
really
I
nice.
feel
Wow, that was
honestly makes a bunch of
super
people-
clean stock from
That's how I
Galen.
started my career, as it were, on YouTube. It's just such a cool
Yeah.
thing. Like people, they're skate videos.
I used to be on my populist, like noble working man of the countryside type shit, but the political ambition of the urban working class is more or less in line with their with their material interests, and the political ambition of the rural peasantry and like rural working class is to be the next planter class.
They do that back air without dropping.
May I explain my view on this? I'll try to be as concise as possible. Sure.
And so they're not quite catching Galen multiple times right now. Is intentionally making himself look like
Up throw back. He loves doing that crazy angle. Gets poofed though by the Sheik up B. And you're dead. Yeah.
Disgusted with these angles. Stop it.
That last one was so unnecessarily risky.
Oh man, there's the Magikarp hat you can see on Lantern.
He is kind of
Come on, someone make a Lantern.
trying to he is a little bit emulating Dark.
Yeah, strong showing by Galen again.
Chilean
another
Fox
where
player.
we have a player who top player like has
I think communism would liberate the world because it's under representation of rural dwellers. No, it would.
Such as
What I'm saying, what I think you fundamentally misunderstood the point that I was communicating there. The interests of the rural population, communism involves democracy. Yes, it does involve worker democracy. The interest of the material interests of the rural populace is the same as the material interests of the urban proletariat, because both of them are part of the working classes. Their relationship to production is the same, and economic output, by and large, with the exception of the occasional petit bourgeois that lives in the countryside. However, the political ambitions of the rural peasantry, the rural populace, are usually, and I say usually because it's not an absolute rule, obviously, dissonant from their actual material interests. They actively advocate for things that would be bad for them because it makes people they dislike suffer. Politically, what they want is to be the next planter class. They do not want to be free. They want to be the boot that is oppressing you.
Get a link to all of the other streams that are there. Go watch some Uma Musume. Go watch some fighting games. Fighting game lineup here is insane.
And to the point about generalizations, I've heard enough about people saying, oh, you shouldn't generalize. Being anti-generalization is being anti-understanding the world. You cannot understand things without generalizing trends to a certain extent. Every generalization I make, understand, unless I specify all of them to a man, that there are exceptions to the rule, and to a certain extent, the exceptions prove the rule. It's like when Marx talks about the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. It is a tendency. There are exceptions. There are instances where the rate of profit increases, but there is a prevailing tendency that the rate of profit declines over time. Same thing here. There is a tendency for the rural population, even the working class, to be lumpen proletariat, to have political ambitions that directly run contrary to things that would benefit and be liberatory to them. You're very well articulated and clearly more well-read than I am. Well-read, almost positive. I'm almost positive. And also, thank you. I work very hard on my skills of articulation. This is not the first time I've had this kind of conversation. Seriously, this is a rare opportunity for me to recommend some reading. I would highly recommend two books and only two books for you to understand the gist of what I'm talking about. The Mass Psychology of Fascism by Wilhelm Reich and the Essays of Rosa Luxemburg, the version that you can find on Amazon. It has The National Question, Reformer Revolution, and a couple other ones. Need to read more. I was only convinced yesterday to actually read theory. I think you don't need to read as much theory as the read theory people would tell you to. Like those two books are legitimately the only essentials that I would recommend that people read. Yeah. Apart from that, you can get a pretty good grasp of like what your political values and prescriptions should be by reading like more data driven stuff, you know, like rather than theory, reading studies that pertain to real like local and regional economics. For example, a lot of my critical support of the Soviet Union comes from my knowledge of affordable housing policy, because not because I've read super extensively about housing policy in the Soviet Union, though I have some, but because I have read about a little under a dozen studies on affordable housing specifically. Theory is gay? Emily, welcome to chat. And yes, you are correct. Theory is gay. Fortunately, I'm also gay, so there's no cognitive dissonance there. But yes, I was just talking about the running dogs of reaction, the rural lumpen proletariat, peasantry, and so forth. Hello. Like the anarchist way of getting people land, they simply stole land and then redistributed it. Yes, and that is something that I support. Thomas Paine actually was one of the founding fathers, was long on this subject, advocated for the public ownership of all land under a democratically accountable governing structure. At the time, it would have been the liberal state, but collective land management is good. And there's historical evidence to prove that. You know, when just know, whenever people bring up the tragedy of the commons, they are gesturing and vague posting, because the tragedy of the commons is fake. It doesn't happen.
Honestly, last year I was here, I saw the mahjong tables. I had like a loose interest in playing.
Oh, they're playing mahjong.
And Mahjong Soul was the tool that I used to learn how to play. And I played it for like a year. I forgot that they even had mahjong.
Any good sets so far? Yeah, we've actually had some really good ones. There were a couple good ones yesterday. JoJo versus Intra something or other, Intra Network or something, was a really good set. Just because I really like Captain Falcon, and I think JoJo played the matchup super well. It was a treat to watch. Only really saw doubles yesterday. Well, I exclusively watched singles because doubles happened later in the evening, and I was already streaming for 8 hours, so I didn't get to catch much of that. But yeah, there have been some. I'll mute that for a little bit. There have been some really good sets. Not a whole lot of back and forth ones. But you know, even the one-sided ones have been pretty good at times. Oh, there was actually Ipengu versus I forget the name of this player, but they were a Peach player. Ipengu actually made some really important adjustments in his set yesterday, and kind of brought it back. Like really worked to close out the Falco Peach matchup in a way that was like really cool to see. It was cool though. Didn't expect to see Rap Monster and Grands. Rap Monster and Grands of doubles is pretty crazy. And yeah, I ask a question. You just did, but yes. You can like this. Look, as per the rules of my chat, this is a place for pretty free-flowing discussion, as long as you're not like the most insufferable disruptive influence on the planet, and like also not like a genocide denier or a Nazi, right? And even then, I usually don't ban people right away. I usually wait for them to expose their entire ass first before I ban them. But, you know. I just asked if I can ask to be polite. I got you. It's good practice. Higher bar than most people meet on twitch.tv. Yeah, Emily, me taking off the mask to reveal Stalin. No questions allowed. The one SpongeBob scene. Nosferatu, but it's just Stalin flicking on the light switch. Bar Flash. What is this? Oh, it's like a planning, organizing app. I see. Advertisements here have been a very mixed bag. Obviously, like, you get to see some of the small business capitalist elements more prominently at grassroots tournaments and stuff. But there have been some real stinkers too. Is it true that communists want to replace the judges, police force, mayors, premiers, and prime ministers with of their nations instead of tearing the state down wholly? I don't know the Canadian words for these titles. I don't know the not Canadian words for these titles. That's fine. It's basically the same. That's what I was told communists want to do generally. No, Emily is correct in that it depends on the communist. And yes, Stalin does have the best facial hair of any dictator. This is true. It depends on the communist, right? What the broad-based mission of communists is, like socialists and communists share certain ideological objectives, and that is eventually the supplanting of a state with a new governing structure that relies more on association of the workers rather than use of force on the behalf of a owning class, in effect to achieve class synthesis between the classes. So there is no longer a working class and an owning class, but rather a singular class of owner workers, therefore rendering society completely classless. And because the state is a tool of like hierarchy, that necessitates the elimination of the state, and money being a means of economically legitimizing that hierarchy and sort of perpetuating the current regime of wealth and resource distribution also must go. That's the philosophical implications that communists and socialists all share. But because of how broad they are, you may notice a lot of that gets non-specific in a hurry. There will be very, very many disagreements on how to achieve those. So you will get communists who do want to initially take steps to simply replace people currently in government with people who bear the label of being a party communist, or somebody who is more obsequious to the broader long-term goal. And in fact, most socialists and communists who engage effectively at in the electoral process will aim for some version of that. Zoran Mamdani is actually a socialist. However, he is participating in part of a reformist vision for getting the ball rolling on a broader socialist and even just social democratic project because of how far off we are from wider decommodification. So a lot of times communists will look like liberals and they will disagree with each other a ton. There is a key difference, though, which is that communists and socialists being opposed in principle to a sort of class system will act in ways that are often very uncomfortable for the ruling class, for the owning class, which is why you see people like Mamdani constantly being heckled by the news media and by millionaires about how he wants to tax millionaires at like 1% on their millions. So in the short term, yes, communists do frequently want to get their officials in the government, as does any political movement, but that's not the end of the communist movements. I think only the most Twitter-addled commies are laboring under the delusion that that's all it would take. You know, if only we could get Chairman Bernie Sanders, which used to be the way that I thought a little bit, but overall, even when communists are fervently disagreeing with each other, we will all agree that, like, obviously there are so many changes that need to happen that extend beyond getting our guys into office at any given level, but ultimately that does still need to happen. You know?
So that's all the Australia. I mean, you know, Chive is also here. We're gonna see how he
But that's not the only avenue to power. A lot of times, what communists will advocate is for local community organizing outside of the traditional state framework to build these parallel structures of power that are capable of coexisting with and eventually supplanting the existing structures of power. It's effectively, you start to build a miniature little vision of communism under the nose of capitalism, because as capitalism decays, people will need those alternative structures to grow, so they can depend on them to more equitably distribute resources and manage, well, the economy.
Look at that shirt. RNG really not good. Legend. That's awesome. I love that. He eats. That's from the venue too. He eats his tournament organizers.
Not eat my opponent.
Eats his opponent. Sorry. When tournament organizers.
Damn, that's crazy. We got cannibalism in the Melee community in the big 2026. But yeah, leftist meme, that's what communists want, is communism.
I wonder why.
But unfortunately for RNG, he's playing against someone who's even taller than him. Look at this aura. And ironically,
And also, it is worth mentioning, communists have never gotten along with each other in the history of communism. Same with liberals. Liberals have never gotten along with each other in the history of liberalism. But all of them have gotten along way better with each other than conservatives ever have with anybody in the history of all time and human society.
Ice climbers is, understandable. Banning Yoshis from Frostbite. I actually asked
You know?
Ices myself.
Like, there was so much revolutionary infighting during the liberal revolutions of the late 18th and early 19th century. Honestly, quite the foreshadow of how, like, how leftist movements would do the same. Giga Chad, anarchists always get along. Buddy, do I have some bad news for you? Anarchists are by no means exempt from this.
For RNG and the Australian players, Frostbite has
Anarchists also do a shitload of infighting. I would know because I've been on both sides of that.
seized on his lap.
And anarchists have done infighting for as long as the anarchist movement has existed. You can read about the Spanish Revolution to that effect. Or not the Spanish Revolution, the Spanish Civil War.
Breathe and die melee, like all the fake Marty Supremes and ping pongs of the world. Frostbite's just chilling.
No one gets along, let's be for real. This is Earth, that's true.
Like, he doesn't do anything super crazy.
But it's a different kind of not getting along, I think.
But all of his neutral, it's real. Like, he's playing the game that we
Like, it's a colloquial, like, not getting along to me is like a political colloquialization of disagreeing on certain subjects and priorities. A lot of times, political, like, intelligent political operatives and members of a certain movement will still be friends and get along with their contemporaries even if they have disagreements, because they recognize, like, we share the same or very similar broader objectives. Good things are good and bad things are bad.
destroying RNG really not good right now. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, you have conservatives who think that bad things are good because they make you upset.
The best of 5 part of the pool. The rest of everything so far has been best of 3. We're finally back to best of 5.
I mean, it's wave 2 pools, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And so RNG really needs to not take any damage at all. And
Ooh.
Big Tipper is not gonna kill quite yet, but Frostbite still got his jump. The neutral B should cover everything, and
Oh, wow.
Opposite, just go for the tipper. Wanna deal with
Millionaires are less than 1% of the population, but people who say they care about minority rights never stand up for them /s. It's funny you should say that, because there's a kernel of truth to that.
then you get swatted with
The term minority doesn't actually refer to mathematical proportions, not directly anyways.
from that position? You just do like
A minority in the political sense is more so determined by who has rights and who doesn't, who enjoys the protection of the state and who is repressed by the state. For example, in South Africa, black people were mathematically, and still are, the vast majority. However, during the time of apartheid South Africa, politically they were a minority because they did not enjoy as much representation and legal protection as South African whites did. Millionaires are in quite a similar boat to the other side of that divide. They compose a very small mathematical minority of the population. However, they constitute the political majority because their interests hog up the vast majority of, policymaking.
You should also notice Frostbite on the fairs is doing roll behind
You know?
every single time. He does it on the up B now. I think he's doing it preemptively.
But also, yes, so much for the tolerant left. Millionaires are the real minority, don't you know? We're only, they're only 1% of the population or something. Why does nobody care about the poor millionaires and billionaires who compose such a small fraction of the population?
Roll behinds that Frostbite is doing to get out of panic situations.
Yeah, and I also
I am very smart.
Frostbite is doing a good job
type shit. This is a lot closer now. I get that concept. I just like to be a chud. Yeah, and I just like to yap. I didn't want to like go in on you specifically. I'm like, people who are like smart enough to pick up on these contradictions and make jokes about them are probably also smart enough to know the thing that I'm about to yap about. But I still like yapping about them because sometimes there are people in chat that don't know about that. And I love exercising my brain. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, even donate to support the channel. It would really mean a lot to me.